Alright, so this is pretty random and kind of weird, but I want to document this, alright? So, I listen to hundreds, maybe thousands of like scary stories, podcasts, real and fake stuff. Really fake stuff. Real stuff, fake stuff, and really fake stuff. And there's one story that, well, I mean, like I said, I listen to thousands, but there is one story that particularly, like, if you're interested in me, if you want to know more about the man behind the screen, I suppose, this story is like phenomenal. So, I mean, this story has kind of really defines my headspace and outlook on the world in a more immature, generalized setting. I mean, I'm guessing the man in the story is probably significantly older than me, thus has probably more experience. So I'm not saying like I'm not saying it's like a cookie cutter version that I think exactly like this or this is exactly the point is this story really speaks to me and I hope this doesn't get copyrighted because I am jacking it jacking it off. I am peeling it right off of a YouTube video from Let's Read. Let's Read is a podcast that I listen to quite often. He's pretty well known, and I'm just hoping it doesn't get like uh, copyrighted. But I'm gonna do this clue scroll in the background, and I'm gonna let this play. So hopefully, I don't know if this is gonna screw up the camera, but we'll see.
It's been a long time since I graduated high school. So long that it feels as if it's all an event that occurred in another person's life. It feels like something that I read about or imagined, something illusory that I've inserted myself into. They say the human body replaces all its living cells every 7 years, so I suppose that physically I am a different person than the one that existed a decade ago. But the final conversation I had with an old history teacher, Mr. Cole, is one that feels like it occurred just yesterday. For almost 15 years, I had replayed the interaction in my mind over and over again. It's something I don't think I'll ever forget. He was standing out of sight from the main crowd, around a corner of the main school building. He wore his sandy brown hair in a rough ponytail, facial hair raggedly fashioned into a handlebar mustache. A cigarette burned between his fingers, adding to the brown nicotine stains that colored the tips. Something struck me about the way he looked at me as I took out my own pack of smokes and asked him for a light. He didn't see me as a student anymore. There was a coldness in his gaze. Something else, too. A kind of pity or disgust in his eyes. Half of me expected him to scold me for feeding such a filthy habit, but he didn't. He didn't say a word as he reached into the pocket of his worn, faded jeans and pulled out an old Zippo. We talked about growing up, about how I was ready to go out into the world and find myself as a person. I asked him how long it took for him to do the same. "I used to think about it a lot," he said, looking off into the near distance. "But you reach a certain age and you know who you are. I live in a little condo near a bar, just on the edge of town, work 9 to 5, then in between I drink. And there ain't nobody there to stop me. I know who I am, and after all these years, there's a kind of victory in that." I'd never heard him talk this way before, never in this tone. He wasn't the Mr. Cole that kept his history class gripped with tales of yore, passionate speeches about life and liberty that had him greatly respected around campus. He seemed defeated. He seemed broken. Mr. Cole wore a wedding band, but it occurred to me that he never mentioned anything about a family. I chose not to ask. We talked about what I had learned at my time attending the school. He listened, he nodded, but I got the impression he was uninterested, somehow unimpressed. This irritated me a little. Sure, my answer was full of cliches and platitudes, but to dismiss my experience in just a glance grated against me. I asked him what he had learned in his time teaching there. Some days, I wish I didn't ask. Some people in this town act like they're not even aware that the outside world exists and might as well be living in a cave. This place is a gutter, one giant trailer park just floating through the universe, somehow apart from it. But that doesn't mean they can't be happy. It doesn't mean they don't have value. I mean, there's no shame in being consciously happy while being unconsciously ignorant. That's just it, kid. They're consciously ignorant, he replied, crushing the burned-up remnants of his cigarette under his boot before lighting up another. I think human consciousness is a tragic mistake in the history of our evolution. He let the thought sink in, and he took in a lungful of smoke, exhaling lazily as his gaze remained pinned to the distant horizon. We became too sentient, too self-aware. Whatever drives the universe forced the creation of an element's separation from itself. We humans are creatures that have no right to exist by natural law. We are things that operate under the false pretenses of having a self, this chaotic mess of senses and feelings, all somehow totally assured that we are each somebody, when in fact, we're all just nobody. So, I'm guessing you're not a religious man, I said, feeling rather accomplished as he chuckled at my response. Religion? Man, now there's a thing. There was a faint smile on his face, as if the very thought of it amused him. A transfer of fear and self-loathing to a figure of divine authority. I can understand the catharsis. God soaks up their doubt and pain with his perfect Star Wars narrative. I don't know, sir. Sounds like you could do with a little old-time religion, I replied, finishing my own cigarette, but not hearty enough to immediately begin another, unlike Mr. Cole. If it's good enough for Grandma, right? He smiled again. At least I'm not rushing towards a cosmic stop sign. It was about this time that I confessed to Mr. Cole that I was shocked to hear him talk this way, that nothing about his classes indicated he had such a pessimistic worldview. I was building up to the question, but he gave me a look which said that he knew well what I was about to ask. You want to know what made me this way, right? He asked with that same faint smile on his withered lips. A lot of people want to know that. I mostly tell him to buzz off, but you... He cut himself for a moment, shaking his head with that look of pity and disgust in his eyes. My wife, God rest her soul. She and I, well, we lost our daughter when she was real young. All the emotion seemed to drain out of him while he spoke. He was clinical in his confession. I think about her every so often, my daughter, and what she was spared. During the better moments, I feel sort of grateful for it. Doctor said she didn't feel a thing, that the drunk driver sent her straight into a coma. And after a few weeks of sleepless, tear-stained nights, somewhere in that dark room she was locked in, she slipped off into another, deeper kind of sleep. I'm sorry. It was all I could think to say. He heard my voice quiver with sadness. No, don't be. It's a beautiful way to go out. Painless, happy, innocent. Trouble with dying later is that it's too late. The damage is done. He had an odd way of reassuring me. You want kids? He asked. I shrugged. I had never really given it any thought. Don't, he responded, almost contemptuously. I think of how arrogant and cruel it is to force a soul out from the ether into this sack of rotting flesh, to condemn a life to walk blindly in this meat grinder. Sometimes I think I should go thank that drunk for getting behind the wheel after one too many. They spared me the sin of being a father. I confided in him that I believed there was more to life than just soul-crushing pain and grinding worthlessness. That now, more than ever, people can act in ways that can change the world for the better. He disagreed. "You see, this is what I'm talking about," he said, evidently growing a little frustrated as he threw down his second cigarette and repeated the action of stamping it out. "Sure, there are broader ideas in play, mainly what is shared between us as a species for our mutual illusions." "Ever seen a dead body?" he asked me. I nodded slowly. "Then you'll know. You look in their eyes. Even in the picture, you can still read them. You know what I see? I see that they welcomed it when it finally came. Not at first, but right there in the final moment. It's relief. They were afraid, and now they see for the very first time how easy it was to just let it all go. In those last few seconds of life, they saw what they were, what they had always been. You, me, them, this whole comic tragedy was never more than thrown together presumptions and stupid blind will. And what you need to do is just let go. To finally know that you didn't have to hold on so tight. To realize that all your life, all your love, all your hate, all your memories, all your heartache, it was all just the same thing. It was all the same dream. A dream that you had inside a locked room. A dream about being a person. Mr. Cole started to walk away, the keys to his truck jangling as he pulled them from his pocket. "Good luck, kid. You're gonna need it." I moved out of town, out to a coastal city where the people aren't like those stuck in small Arizona towns. Sometimes I think Mr. Cole was wrong, that there's a brighter side to existence that he neglected to touch upon. But sometimes, in darker moments, as I'm lying in bed after long days spent working in a cramped, sterile office space, Mr. Cole's words run through my mind. They bounce off the walls of my skull, refusing to relinquish my fears, feeding on my doubts. It's in those moments that I know Mr. Cole was right.
No, that's that. I hope it all came through. I hope it doesn't get demonetized, like I get paid for this. But I hope it doesn't get like copyright infringed or whatever. But if you ever wanted to know more about me, but I can't really say it in the right words, that story is painfully close. So, yeah. Well, there you go. You know, little insight to my outlook on things later on.